Hello everyone, and welcome to This Nintendo Life. My name is NBZ, and it's the end of the world, Bally. There's big news in the world of Nintendo, and it shall be covered here, but how are you doing today?
I think I've recovered a bit from the news first hitting me like straight on. I was sitting at work, I just have a few texts from you, and then I just sort of, oh, NBZ's texting me, I'll just have a quick look, and then I look at them and I'm like, what? What
and then
is
the rest
going
of
on?
the rest of your day was ruined, basically.
Pretty much is all I could think about.
Oh dear. Well, we'll get into that, I guess, Bally. Why don't you tell the fine folks at home what we're going to be talking about today?
As usual, we're going to talk about what we have been playing, and then we're going to wrap up the news that we've just been mentioning with some emails. So a few of you wrote in about, the catastrophe that has happened, that we will get to in the second segment and wrap it all up in one big go.
We should probably mention that this is just about the NX news about it being in 2017, all that stuff. So, all that will be discussed in the second part of the show, a big, long segment. But we're just going to kick things off, as usual, with video games that we've been playing here and there. We've been going back and forth. I haven't had much chance to play, a lot of stuff because I've got exams, but I have played some stuff, and we'll discuss it. Bally, let's kick off with you to begin with, as per usual. What have you been doing?
Yeah, I've been fairly busy as well, but I have been delving into Metroid Prime 2 Echoes. Which of course is on the Metroid Prime trilogy, which was on the Wii U Virtual Console.
Right.
So, yeah, I am really enjoying this game so far. I think I'm about 8.5 hours in. It feels just like Metroid Prime 1. Obviously, I played that on the GameCube, whereas this I'm playing with the implemented motion controls as it's part of the trilogy. I really don't know which I prefer in terms of controls. They both have
They're both garbage, is what you mean?
They both have advantages and disadvantages. This one feels closer to a dual stick shooter, but still isn't one by quite some way. So what's so crucial about the controls on the GameCube games is that you essentially lock on, and then the second you're locked on, and you start shooting, you automatically hit your target. Whereas this, it's slightly different. The lock-on doesn't control where you shoot, it just controls the camera, which initially does feel quite frustrating because you have to lock on and then you have to aim your reticle. Whereas, like I said, with the GameCube, you literally just lock on and start shooting, and it's pretty instantaneous.
I feel like that's something which allowed people to say, hey, Metroid Prime isn't really a first-person shooter because, there's not really any skill in the shooting. You lock on and just slam the button a few times, right? The focus was much more on exploration and, strafing around enemies and that kind of stuff in combat.
Yeah. I mean, the skill is, like you said, the skill is in the way you strafe around enemies more often than not. And that's no different between the motion controls, obviously. And it's all about using your B dash move. So you sort of do a little dash. It's almost like Link's sideways roll or something. It's a bit weird. So I think that, in terms of the gameplay, like I said, it's very similar to Prime 1, but it's the aesthetic and the world creation that is so different with this game. It is unbelievably dark. From the start of the game, there are the Federation Force, those famous guys.
Oh yeah, our favorite people.
They are become zombies, and they get taken over by the Ing. Which is,
and one of our followers on Twitter sent an amazing GIF of
it's amazing.
Basically making fun of the Metroid Prime Federation Force announcement with text on all these Ing destroying the Federation Force members. It's really funny.
Yeah,
we probably retweeted it at some point on our Twitter account.
So obviously Zelda has done the dark and light worlds a number of times in games. Mario did it a tiny bit with sort of Shadow Mario and stuff in Sunshine and things.
Right, but
that.
it's kind of a trope that Nintendo returned to.
It's a trope, and I think it works really well for the Metroid universe. I think because this is arguably the darkest game like I've ever played. The Ing are so creepy, and
they like get under your skin, don't they? They
Yeah.
they just look fucking horrible.
Yeah, they really
the kind of
do.
feeling you get when you see a spider just fucking crawling up your wall. You just like start shivering.
They look quite a lot like the beasts from Twilight Princess.
Yeah, they have that kind of feel to them.
But they feel more aggressive and more parasitic almost. They really come after you, and there's so many different forms of them. So the whole sort of ether and dark ether, you're on the planet ether, and then dark ether is sort of the alternate reality, the dark world. And I should make clear that in the dark world, its atmosphere hurts Samus, so you have to use safe spots. And it just completely changes the atmosphere of the game.
Do you think, and I know you haven't played a huge amount in the Dark World or of this game, like in total, but do you think that idea of constraining yourself to these little pockets of air bubbles almost where you can't get hurt detracts from the core of what Metroid is, where you are so open and free to explore and you feel safe doing that as long as you're prepared, able to take on enemies? Do you think that takes away from what makes Metroid so fun in the first place?
I'd say it's still fun, but I do agree with you that it's a very un-Metroid thing to do. And I think that if the regular Ether world didn't exist in this game and the whole game was Dark World, I would have a problem with it, because I'd be like, it doesn't feel like Metroid, I want to play Metroid. But I think the amount of time you spend in the Dark World, which I'd say is under 50% of the time, but by certainly up to the point I'm at, is much less than 50% of the time. I think I can see what they're trying to do, and I do think it is fun and works well, and there's a different form of playing. I should make clear, you're not actually invincible in these pockets. What happens is, and if this actually changes, I've just got to the point where there's like a mechanical thing that changes that I'll explain. But basically, your health goes down rapidly when you're outside of these bubbles, and then when you're inside a bubble, your health gradually goes up. It
recharges, doesn't
exactly,
it? Yeah.
Very, very, very slowly. And that's one of my biggest criticisms of the Dark World or Dark Ether, is that you literally gain 1 health per second. So if you want to gain 99 health, that's 99 seconds just for 1 energy tank, which takes ages to recharge. And maybe that was on purpose, the way the game was designed, because they want you to stop and think and look around a bit more, because you definitely do have to plan out the way you're moving. But I
guess as well, you have the scanner, which makes you want to engage with the environment a bit more and make sure you're looking at where you need to go next and that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's just encouraging you to slow the pace down. And all the dark areas I've reached so far are very, very linear. It's not become this whole, you have to go and explore and do loads of long runs sort of with your health depleting fast. But the thing is, I think that the game from now on will implement that, because I've just gotten the suit that makes the health you lose in Dark Ether go down much, much more slowly. So
right.
I'm pretty sure the maps in the Dark World are going to start spreading out quite a bit more than they have been so far. And I think
so you'll be able to you'll be able to explore a bit more without getting hurt as much, but it also means you'll probably have greater distances between save points, right?
Exactly. Really long distances. The safe points are, some of them, so there are lots of save points that are always just there, but there are other save points that you have to shoot with a specific beam, whether that's dark or light or regular, and it becomes really sort of tactical how you use your beams and things like that. So, and I should mention the dark and light beams. So when you defeat enemies with a dark beam, it charges your light beam, and when you defeat enemies with your light beam, it charges your dark beam. So you have these 2 beams that are pretty crucial for doors and different enemies and things that you have to make sure are constantly, kept in balance to some degree. So there's a lot.
You have ammo for them, right?
They have ammo, which is quite frustrating at times.
Right. It's weird because they take that concept of the missile and then start applying it to even more stuff. So it's you start to have more management and that kind of thing going on. Do the enemies like still provide you though with enough pickups and everything?
Yeah, definitely. And the Dark World is full of these sort of stationary enemies that don't really attack you, but you can always shoot and kill them to get boosts like power-ups and ammo and things. So, and they're just sort of like this atmospheric. They look like tentacles almost. It's quite weird. Like the whole Dark I can't say highly enough how dark and awesome the Dark Ether world looks. Like the sky is always purple almost, and it's really kind of.
I imagine the music is equally.
The
creepy
music
to go
is
along.
so eerie, and it's
I will say my one
cool.
favorite thing about Metroid Prime 2 Echoes, the intro music might be the best Metroid music of all time.
It's pretty great. I don't even think it's in this game because of its trilogy, and I don't think, you don't see the Metroid Prime 2 start screen, I believe. You just go straight into the game.
Oh shit, right,
So,
because it's
yeah.
part of the trilogy. That sucks. That's the
Yeah.
best bit.
So, who knows? It might come up later. But I should also mention Dark Samus is a great character. And she's so sort of... She's not just a dark version of Samus. She's more than that. If you look closely, she's actually got like claws on her hands and her feet. They're like clawed and look a bit like Venom from Spider-Man. She's very kind of corrupted almost. Like it looks
Right, you were
really
making
cool.
this point on Twitter, and I was
Yeah.
like, oh, isn't she more like, the SAS, which is the other like dark version
Yeah,
of Samus in the
of
series?
course. Well, the SX is like almost a carbon copy, whereas Dark Samus definitely is a different thing.
So I know in this game, like, you fight Dark Samus like multiple times, and
Yes.
the difference there between that and Fusion is like Fusion, you're always running away from the SAX because it is so much more powerful than you. Do you feel that like kind of breaks things a bit? The fact that like you're equally powered as you go along with Dark Samus and you're fighting. I guess like it's weird to. The way in which you'd have to like do an escape sequence in Metroid Prime would be very different because like the speed is a lot slower, like running speed, and you can't really look behind you to see what's happening. So I guess they had to make some compromise there. But how do you feel about those fights generally?
I absolutely love the boss fights, and that's including the Dark Samus boss fight. I think so far, like this game is very good. Metroid Prime has sort of the first game has fewer bigger boss fights. This game has much more smaller boss fights. You find like you're in a boss fight almost every new area. Sometimes it feels like it's very consistent.
So it's very Fusion-like in that way.
Yeah, it's way. I've faced by the end of this game, I will have faced way more bosses than Fusion. I would even say like there's real.
It's interesting that there's a lot of parallels there, like SAX vs Dark Samus and all these bosses and everything.
And I think like that whole Dark Samus and the Ing is so cool because the whole point of Metroid Prime was that you'd have Samus, you'd have the Metroids, and you'd have the Space Pirates almost in this three-way fight. Whereas now you're having a fourth factor in this story, so you have the Ing, the Space Pirates, and the Metroids and Samus. Like it's all coming together, and obviously the Space Pirates are wanting to try and utilize the power and the information that like the Ing have, and they end up getting caught out a few times, and you fight Space Pirates along the way, and like I'm intrigued to see how that sort of plot works out, and just reading all the lore and trying to work out what's going on.
Do you like the more kind of directed story in this one? Because I feel like in Metroid Prime 1 it was much more of you personally unearthing all the history and scanning stuff and reading documents, whereas I think Metroid Prime 2 is much more direct in its cutscenes about the past and like all the stuff with what's the Lumos? I can't remember what the good guys are. The Luminoth, yes. Yeah. Because they actually have dialogue with you and like more direct like exposition.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you say that you uncover more in Metroid Prime 1, because it's actually, you uncover more in this game in the sense that whenever you scan something that's lore related, I should say, it doesn't actually appear straight away. You then have to pause the game and go into your like archive of logs to read it, which I actually don't like as much. I prefer the first game where you just scan, you get the lore there, and then straight away, and if you don't want to read it, you just press ahead faster. But they were obviously trying to make the game more streamlined for people who didn't care about the lore.
Right, yeah.
But you're right, there are more cutscenes, and it's quite interesting just to see what's going on, and stuff does get explained a bit more.
Is there voice acting? I can't remember when the first
No.
Luminoth you meet talks to you, because it was a while ago that I started playing Prime 2, and of course, infamously, that worm thing that I just died to and was scared of, and never went back to on the GameCube.
You're thinking of the Bomb Guardian.
The Bomb Guardian, yeah.
The Bomb
So
Guardian.
I never got really past that point, which is very early in the game.
The Bomb Guardian, to your credit, was further along than I anticipated.
Okay.
But no, like I said, the bosses are so cool, and like those boss fights in the Dark World feel very different because there's much more ebb and flow to the battle because of the way that when you're in these safe zones, your health goes up. So the idea of losing health isn't like, oh god, I'm losing health, I need to pick up pickups. All you have to do is stay in a bubble and survive, basically. It feels very different, and I quite like it.
Do you feel, though, that like they encroach on that safe space in the boss fights? Do you feel like
Yes.
you can just go there and be safe, or is it
No.
still like a threat?
It's still a big threat, and like I said, and this is obviously the reason why you charge up so slowly in these safe zones, is because that you do actually have to fight a lot of enemies when you're in them, and it would be too powerful if your health just went to full when you went to a safe zone. So I can understand why they did it. It's just a bit frustrating. Right, my biggest gripe with this game, and I'm surprised I didn't feel this more about Metroid Prime 1. And I definitely remember feeling it about Prime 1, but I just not to this degree. And that's, I don't know whether it's the location or the number, but it's the save rooms. Like they're in the wrong places. There's not enough of them. I have found myself like wandering around in new spaces for 20 to 40 minutes just looking for the next save room, and then you might be low on health and there's enemies coming at you and you're like, oh my god, just get away from me. All I want to do right now is save. And it's so frustrating because there's like really big bosses that you end up fighting, and they just don't stick a save room straight after the boss. You can be exploring for another 20 minutes, for goodness sake. It's so frustrating. And we were just talking off mic about this, but I agree with you that the 2D Metroids are much better at just implementing save rooms more frequently. And it's just, I don't care if they break the thematic vibe of a boss room just to shoehorn a save room in at the side. I don't care, because it's just important that they have them there. And it's just crazy that a game like the Prime series doesn't have a save system like Zelda, for example. It's just really frustrating. And maybe that's one area where they were trying to be like the 2D games, is like, the save rooms are such a important part of Super Metroid Fusion or whatever, and like maybe they were just trying to implement that, but it's just frustrating.
Yeah, no, I totally feel where you're coming from. I was also wondering, like we were talking a little bit about, maybe it's your own time management or situation where you feel like you have to set aside a certain amount of time to play this game, and I don't know if that was a similar thing back when you played the original Prime. I can't remember like what was going on back then.
It was bad then, but it's worse now, I find, where I just, in my head, I think, right, I've got this to do later on in my day, but I'm going to play some Wii U now, and it's just frustrating because I can't just pick up and play and stop playing when I want.
It would be alleviated if like Wii games on Virtual Console were able to be save stated, but obviously because of the nature of that stuff, you can't.
Yeah, exactly, and it's really frustrating. And who knows if NX has a bit of Virtual Console for stuff like Wii and Wii U. I hope they can implement that functionality. So yeah, I'm only 8.5 hours in. I reckon I'm maybe only about a third of the way through the game. There's so much to go. I'll hopefully play as much as possible for next time, but I'm really enjoying it. It's been too long since I played a 3D Metroid. Really,
it was back in 2014 when you beat Prime, correct?
Yeah, 2014.
So you've given it a good break, I think.
It's been a long time, but yeah, in this the 30th anniversary of Metroid.
The year of Luigi.
The year of Luigi. Loving it. It's good. It's a good game.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad that someone on this podcast will play Metroid Prime 2.
One day, MBZ, you are going to play this game.
Fuck no. Oh, God. Everything about it turns me off, but I'm glad you're having a fun time.
Cool.
All right, so let's move on to what I've been playing. So, as I said, I haven't had a huge amount of time to delve into anything too deep, but I did manage to finish Final Fantasy VII, which, tick that off the list of classic JRPGs that I am, as this wanderer through the desert coming across every so often. And Bally, I have to tell you, you were wrong. The final boss was not a dick and a pain in the ass. So Sephiroth is, like, he's challenging. I think, like, the end of that game is well done because it allows you to have the breathing room if you want to go out and do this extra stuff, which I did. I went and got, like, the ultimate weapons for all of the 3 characters, the party members I was using, and that certainly was a big boon in the final kind of dungeon area, because when I was coming across, like, just standard enemies, I have, like, the best weapons in the game, and so I don't need to, like, waste all my mana, my magic points and stuff on them, and I'm just, like, smashing them with my standard moves instead, and really helped me kind of just, like, push through that last area. And then I get to the final boss, and I do it first time, but it is challenging. Basically, there always has to be one bullshit move, right? So you get to Sephiroth, and, like,
Of course, it's a JRPG.
Yeah, well, you get to Sephiroth, and you get to his final form, because obviously multiple forms.
Of course.
And he does this move, which is the most absurdly, like, fucking over-the-top thing. He starts on the edge of the solar system, and, like, this massive, like, enormous meteor or whatever comes from the edge of the solar system, and this, like, literally 2.5 minute animation of this comet flying through the different, like, planets of the solar system is, like, goes past Jupiter, goes past, like, Venus, and, like, you see it this the whole time, and eventually it gets to Earth and hits you, and this move takes off 15/16 of your life bar. So literally most of your health is just gone in one hit, no matter what you are at. And so that's a little bit of a dick move, because then you have to be like, shit, okay, I need to make sure no one dies. If someone does, I need to get ready the Phoenix down so I can get them back up, and then I have to have my cure ready, and I have to reestablish, like, my guard thing, because that goes down. But, like, it's so stupid, because this whole time it's like this 2.5 minute animation that you cannot skip. I think that's maybe one complaint with Final Fantasy VII. The animations look cool, like, the first few times, but you keep using them throughout the whole game, and you can't skip these things. They're, like, really over the top and long. And yeah, that one, Supernova, just fucking... I can understand, like, some people are telling me they had trouble with the final boss. I totally understand why you would, because then you'd have to go back to the save point, which is before the boss gauntlet, and, you know, that's an annoying thing about JRPGs, is what they do with that endgame stuff. But I think that Final Fantasy VII is an easy enough game, and I think it is fair enough at the end, where, you know, he's not a dick and piles on a bunch of moves after he's done that ridiculous thing. So you're able to get through it, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was a great ending, and you know, it's not aged well in terms of story. I know a lot of people have nostalgia for that, but it's an excellent game. It's truly excellent, and yeah, I would just reiterate what I said last time. If you're afraid of going back to it, don't be, because it's bloody good fun. So, yeah.
I'm happy for you that final boss wasn't a nightmarish experience.
Yeah, no, it was good. It was the right amount of challenge. Like, I felt like it put up a fight, and I didn't just kind of, you know, sail my way through the end.
Was this game as balanced as Chrono Trigger? Because I know you sort of see that as the most balanced, streamlined, smooth RPG experience. It's
not quite as perfect as Chrono Trigger is, but it's damn close. Like, it really is very thin line between the two. And I think, I don't know, maybe that's why they're so praised, but I don't think it gets brought up enough, is, like, how well streamlined these JRPGs are, in the sense that, like, over ridiculous grinding is never necessary, really. Like, you if you have a good grasp of the systems and everything, you can get through it without having to just blow your load. So, great stuff. Final Fantasy VII, still a great game. The other thing I've been playing the last couple of days is I don't think I've ever talked about a Layton game on the podcast, have I? I believe I talked about...
You played Layton versus Wright, I think.
Right, yes. I did talk about Phoenix Wright versus Professor Layton.
That's the one.
But I have played the first 2 Layton games on DS, and it's one of these things where, like, I've always wanted to be like, I needed to go back and finish the Phoenix Wright trilogy. I've always wanted to just go through and finish the Layton trilogy. So I finally got round to the 3rd game, which is called Unwound Future. And Bally, you'd love it because it's all about time travel. And yeah, so the game is about, like, Luke, who is Professor Layton's companion. He's like, this boy is like 10 years old. You get a message from the future from, like, I am future Luke. You need to come to this place and do a thing. So it's all about, like, going to the future and finding things out. And generally, I like the Professor Layton games. I don't like them much as Ace Attorney. I think Ace Attorney is a stronger series, and it speaks to me more. Layton is cool, but I think there are issues when it comes to, like, it's obviously all about puzzles and story, right? And I think it generally strikes a good balance between the two. But I think one of the shortfallings of Layton is a lot of the time they'll give you puzzles that are just, like, these obscure things that have nothing to do with, like, the narrative that's going on. And generally, like, when it's a big narrative section, they do a good job of, like, interlinking it so that the puzzle you're doing kind of correlates to the thing that's happening. Like, there's this one instance where you're in a casino and, like, you're being assaulted on all sides by these guards, and you need to figure a way to get out of there. So the puzzle comes up, and it's like this Tetris block thing of fitting pieces inside of this shape. And basically what you're doing is you're crafting, like, a gun out of these casino parts, and the gun, like, shoots coins out of it, basically. So it's really cool. You, like, put it all together, and then you have a cutscene afterwards of Professor Layton wielding this gun and just shoots coins at all these guys in the head. It's really funny. I really like it when the game does that stuff. I think that's when it is at its strongest. But then sometimes you'll come across it, and it's like this random person in the street, and it's like, oh, you need to do this puzzle. And the puzzle's like, so girl A is 5 years old, boy 3 is this year old, this guy is 7 years old, what age is this guy? Like, that sort of puzzle where it feels more like I'm sitting doing the GCSE math challenge than I am playing a video game. Like, when that happens, that's where I lose interest and my engagement goes down. I think a lot of those puzzles which are not interactive in the sense that, like, the casino gun one, you're moving objects into a space and flipping them around. Like, it's tactile, right? Whereas a lot of the puzzles I don't like are ones which feel like it's a thing I have to figure out in my head. And that's fine because the DS is perfect. They have, like, this memo screen which you can go to and, like, write down notes and figure things out. But it doesn't feel as engaging as that other stuff. It feels like I'm doing work as opposed to stretching my brain in a more fun way, you know? So that's, like, those are the sort of things that I come across which are a little annoying. But otherwise, like, it's pretty standard fare for the Layton games. Like, it ramps up in difficulty pretty well. I do think, like, sometimes the wording on some of the puzzles is really confusing and unclear. There's, like, stuff with directions, which it's just, like, there's this one puzzle where you're looking over the top of, like, a car park, and you have this car that you have to move into a parking space, right? And the wording is stuff like, if you go on this space, you have to move left or right. If you go on this space, you have to move straight. I'm like, okay, but does straight mean relative to the car or relative to my perspective? And, like, that sort of thing is the miscommunication, which makes it hard for me to feel like I've satisfactorily been able to answer it. It's like, well, yeah, I knew what I had to do, but, like, it's not made clear enough to me. And that, I think, there are a lot of instances where I feel a little frustrated and cheated because it's just not well explained in terms of, like, the wording of the puzzle. So that's still a problem, and I don't know how they fix that aside from, like, trying to get in puzzles which aren't as complicated, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, a lot of the kind of extraneous aspects, like the visuals, the music, one of the funniest things about Layton games is the NPC characters, because they really look like non-humans. They look like the most disproportioned, weird faces and, like, so strangely drawn. Like, they're almost Picasso-esque in the way that they appear to you. And it's a strange contrast because Layton and Luke are kind of, like, Professor Layton has 2 dots for eyes, you know? Like, he's very simple. And these other characters you come across are just these deranged, like, weird manifestations. And I'm like, what the fuck is this weird place I'm in? So that's a little, like, jarring and disconcerting. But, like, the other stuff I love, like, I think there's this certain... unique thrill to watching a cutscene on a DS. Like, obviously, like the resolution is really like low and bad, but like having the voice acting and watching these little, like, they're really beautiful, like really well put together animations, and there is a curiousness and a wondrousness about that I still like get a thrill out of watching on this tiny kind of handheld, which seems like not. Yeah, it's charming. I would say that it is very charming. A lot of charming elements, like the music. It's really hitting me this time. The music's fantastic. There's a lot of kind of accordion and violin in there. Like, it feels like kind of bustling, kind of street stuff, but also like has this JRPG tinge to it. It has like a Xenoblade almost element, but kind of like this more kind of gentlemanly, sophisticated thing as well. It fits tremendously well, yeah, I've always listened to the music in Layton games, but for some reason this one's just sticking out to me. It's really like jumping out in my face, and it's wonderful. And I'll probably put some of it in the show in the break, so you should listen to that. Yeah, I think just overall it feels like this game is the payoff for the trilogy, where it's, you know these characters, you've followed them through their journey. There's always some kind of crazy twist in a Layton game to do with, you know, the world and everything, and I'm waiting for that. I'm not quite gotten there yet, but it does feel like they're talking about past history of these characters and their individual relationships and how it all connects together, and it kind of works across the series. And I like that. I think that's a satisfying thing to do when you've got an audience who's like come along for a trilogy, and there is like this past relationship with the characters that you kind of continue on with. And yeah, it's been very engaging. That's the one thing that really pushes me through. Like, I like the puzzles and they're fun, but I think the narrative is what draws people to Professor Layton, because it's really quirky and weird and satisfying. So I really am enjoying it, and I'm probably going to be done with it soon. They're not really very long games. They're like 10 to 15 hours, and I'm maybe like 8 to 8.5 into this one, so nearing the end. But yeah, really enjoyed it so far. It's nice to just be back using the touchscreen and playing stuff on DS. It reminds me like how perfect some of these games were at the time. The touchscreen just worked beautifully in all these cases for all these interactive puzzles, and even for the ones that you have to think about, just having the memo down there to like scroll things and write like annotations is super useful and helpful. And it's really the kind of game that couldn't be done on another platform which didn't have a touchscreen, which makes me think, like, I think there's actually a Layton mobile game that Level 5 put out, but I don't think it's... Yeah, I think it's like a weird different thing that's not actually a proper Layton game, which obviously it's a mobile game, so, you know, you never have high expectations, but it's unfortunate, because I think they've kind of stopped the series after, like, the 2 trilogies they've done. So... Yeah, Bally, I know you're really curious. You're probably more interested in Layton than Phoenix Wright.
Yeah, I am. It just seems more accessible, certainly for someone who's not played any of the games in either series. And, you know, it's something I want to try out when I can get rid of this dastardly backlog that just keeps on.
Oh,
growing.
yeah. The pile grows. The pile grows ever stronger.
It's definitely on my list of things to do.
Okay, cool. Well, yeah, that's what I've been playing mainly. Stardew Valley continues to consume my life, but I will not bore you with the details. Yeah, that thing's going to take some beating for Game of the Year, Bally, I tell you what. All right, well, that's going to close out our first segment. Join us for our extended second segment, where we'll be talking about NX, Zelda, E3, a bunch of shit, and we'll have
your seatbelts.
Yes, do. Strap in. It's going to be a hell of a ride. So we'll see you in a little bit. Alright everyone, welcome back to the apocalypse. Here we are at ThisNintendoLife, breaking down for you the craziness that has ensued in the past few days. So Bally, Nintendo dropped some fucking bombshells regarding NX, regarding E3, regarding The Legend of Zelda, and it all came about as a result of their financial briefing. They had an investor Q&A after that, I think, which has gone up, and I think there's some questions that people have gone into, but nothing super curious has been gleaned from it. The big pieces of news came out of Nintendo themselves, and despite them obviously losing a lot of money, which was expected and everything, they had to hopefully shore up people's ideas, so the stock price didn't tank, but it kind of dropped anyway. Here are the big pieces of news, Bally. Number one, the Nintendo NX is releasing in March of 2017, or at least is pegged to release in March of 2017. 2016, the dream is dead. Any predictions we made were fucking wrong. So, the dream is dead, it's March 2017. Number two, The Legend of Zelda NX is a thing. It is coming out alongside the Wii U version. Apparently both have been developed in tandem, and as a result of NX coming out in March 2017, Zelda has been delayed, the Wii U one, until March 2017, when both will come out. And finally, Nintendo will not be showing anything regarding the NX at E3. The only playable game on the E3 show floor will be The Legend of Zelda for Wii U, not for NX, and there will be nothing else playable at E3. Okay, so with that out of the way, Bally, what were your first thoughts on hearing this clusterfuck of a bunch of news?
I mean, I think it was good you've just outlaid it in those 3 points, because I think some of those points are much, much, much worse than others. So I think the least bad point, arguably, is perhaps the NX is not coming out this year, it's coming out March 2017. Like, you know, that's just a few months difference. A few months is nothing in the world of Nintendo. That's not the end of the world. That's bearable. It's bad news, but it's bearable. Whatever. I think the second point you made, which was, you know, Zelda being entirely tied together, 2 versions coming out the same date, that is bad. Like, this is a game that was meant to come out initially. Wasn't it initially meant to be holiday 2014? Then it was 15. Then it was 16. Then now it's...
No, it was 2015 originally. They showed it at E3 2014, and at E3 2014 they popped up. It said 2015, and so holiday 2015 was the initial expectation. It was also because at the end of 2014 there was the Game Awards, in which Miyamoto and Aonuma were like, oh, my game's coming out before yours, they're both going to be out at the end of 2015. Neither of them were, because clearly they're all fucking liars. But yes, so yeah, it's been delayed a number of times now, and this is probably an egregious one.
What I think is the worst was your third point. No NX at E3. Now, I'm talking from the point of view of someone who's really interested in Nintendo, arguably a hardcore Nintendo fan, very keen on what they have to show. No NX at E3 is just a kick in the gut. It is just so... because it makes you think, like, if it's coming out next year, why not at least show it to E3 just to keep the hype train going? Like... it feels weird. It's just 3 bad points of news all came at once, and it just feels like the next few months there's just nothing. And that's, well, not nothing. There's going to be Zelda E3. Great. That is good. But we kind of expected that. That is the absolute bare minimum, and they've kind of gone with the bare minimum, I feel.
How crazy is it, though? Like, we're getting a bunch of Zelda at E3. We are fucking so excited for Zelda, and yet, like, this news has put things into a perspective where it's like, oh, it's just Zelda E3. Like, we should be, like, out of our seats, like, oh my god, we're seeing Zelda E3, but, like, this has really... I think, here's the crucial point. For Nintendo fans, all this news is, in the short term, a fucking catastrophe. Like, this is the worst news we could possibly hear. As people who care about the news of Nintendo and want to know what they're doing and keep up with everything on a daily basis, in the short term, this is like the fires of Pompeii are raining down upon us and we are burning in them, right? Like, that is the short term, okay? Long term wise, a couple years down the road, will we really feel that this was a big turning point, that it had so much of an impact? Because the way that we can view it is like, a lot of things like Kimishima has said that part of the reason the NX has been delayed to 2017 is because they wanted to have enough software to show, right? I think a lot of this is Nintendo trying to do things on Nintendo's own terms. And if we look at it from that perspective, it makes a lot of sense. Like, the Nintendo movement away from E3 has been a gradual one, and it's actually something that we should have probably expected in some terms, because, like, they treat it as a way to connect with their fans, but not, like, in the direct way, you know, on stage and everything that Sony and Microsoft do. Like, they have their own Nintendo, you know, digital event, and it's very, like, they are removing themselves from E3, and I think this is interesting because it either says something about Nintendo, or, as Jeff Gerstmann alluded to, and he tweeted about this, it says something about the state of E3, because we already this year have Disney on at E3, Activision are doing their own thing, EA are doing their own thing, like, big names, big companies who usually show up to this event are realizing, hey, we can just do a thing where we invite fans and get them there instead and start getting good word of mouth out via YouTube influences. All this stuff probably benefits us more than maybe showing up at the E3 show floor. It's really expensive to have booth space, all that stuff. And Nintendo are still kind of doing that traditional thing. They're having booth space, they're doing Zelda stuff, but it does maybe say something about the state of E3 rather than the state of Nintendo. How do you feel about that, Bally?
Yeah, I definitely can see where Jeff Gerstmann is coming from, and I definitely do agree with him to some extent in that. And I think each of these companies has different segments of fans that they want to appeal to in different ways. I think from Nintendo's point of view, it is arguably a very narrow fan base that they're appealing to at E3. And if they can, and I think that you could even maybe argue that something like the Nintendo Directs, when they can get a bit of viral traction online, can almost spread further than an event like E3. And that's what we have to hope for now, is that, you know, October time, that sort of time, there's going to be some sort of event, whether it's online only or whether they do actually do a stage show somewhere, which would be really unique and weird, of what the NX is going to be. I think that E3 is in decline because games journalists can get their games and experience different things and get their info from other places. The idea of a show floor being the only place you can try out games is not as popular as it used to be, and it's just the way the industry's changed, and I don't think Nintendo are necessarily leading the change or behind the change. I think they're just doing their own different change. So I think there may be a bad barometer from Jeff Gerstmann's point of view as to how to approach E3, because they've been approaching E3 very differently for quite some time now. I think definitely it's better to look to perhaps Sony and Microsoft when it comes to the health of E3 in general, because they do this sort of traditional, like you said, stage show presentation and show floor demos far more than Nintendo have been doing.
Yeah, no, that's very true. I think it's also different because from a personal perspective and from a fan perspective, E3 is like Christmas. It's like when everything happens and when everyone gets excited. It's all, you know, it's a huge hype train, and people you know, generally want to find out all the news that happens from there. And so I think that, like, this is why it's so crushing to people, because E3 was supposed to be this huge place where we're finding out about what the hell Sony are doing with the Neo, and like our Xbox doing their own half step as well. And then Nintendo is the big question mark, is like, we still don't know what NX is. This is the flabbergasting thing, is if Nintendo don't show NX at E3, this system will come out having never been shown at an E3 prior to release. That's crazy. That's fucking absurd. Like, it's never been done before. I don't think in the history of E3. Obviously, before E3 existed, you know, console just came out whenever. But, like, this is kind of a watershed moment. And I do definitely think that they have deliberately delayed NX, and that was the consequence. Because we imagine that Zelda, the decision to put it on NX must have been made a while ago. They must have realized, this is a sinking ship. This needs to be a Twilight Princess situation. We have to move it along. And so, clearly the NX stuff has been in the works, and they've had work going on the Zelda version. And they said 2016 for Wii U Zelda, probably thinking that the NX was going to be ready in time for holiday 2016, right? That seems the natural thought process is they were prepared to put it out at the end of this year, but for some reason, be it software or manufacturing or some thing that's maybe outside of their control, they aren't able to, right? Do you think the NX was originally pitched to be 2016, Bally?
Almost definitely. I think it probably was. But at the same time, I do think Nintendo have decided, that maybe they are trying to think outside the box, and they've decided that it's not all about holiday season in terms of gaming. And this was a point that Alex Navarro was making on the Giant Beast cast, which is, why are games companies obviously it's obvious why they're obsessed with that holiday season, because that's when everyone is spending more money, people have time off, and games are bought. But he made the argument that, look at something like Nintendo. They really aim a lot of their products at younger audiences. Younger audiences have tons of time off in spring and summer. They might not have as much money then, from Christmas gifts, whatever you want to say, but they have a lot of time in spring and summer where they will be playing a lot of video games, and that the industry just doesn't tend to release many games or consoles in that period. And maybe Nintendo are saying, look, we didn't want to delay the NX, but we're in this position. Why don't we go for this spring slot and try and aim at that younger market that's play more games in the summer, and hopefully try a different tactic?
Yeah, that is, it's something that really flabbergasts me, is the fact that there are no games released in the summer. I understand, obviously kids are outside and playing, but also they have so much time off. It's ridiculous. Yeah. So the fact that there's never anything that comes out in that period, I definitely think Nintendo could fill that space. We should also think, from a European perspective, which we're talking from, Nintendo have a history of releasing consoles in this market during this time period. It comes as a result of the past, console releases being delayed because of, that's the way things were back then. But because GameCube N64 came out in North America around the end of the year, November time, it means that the knock-on effect was, in Europe, we got the N64 in March. We got the GameCube in April. There is a history of Nintendo console launches in this time period. Not only that, but generally their handhelds come out in that time period as well. GBA, DS, 3DS, all spring releases in Europe, and I think some of them in North America as well. So as a result, I don't think it's actually breaking that much ground, the fact that they're positioning it. Maybe for the North American market, yes, but as far as we're concerned, I think it's a time of year where people have had past experience of buying consoles. So, I don't know how much it'll affect us.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're kind of looking at perhaps the lighter parts of this news, and like you said earlier, in 2 years' time, is this really going to be a bad situation? I mean, does this news just mean that the launch lineup is going to be more solid, more games, and even perhaps have third-party support? Sort of everything we've been hoping for in a Nintendo console launch. Has this bad news now meant that it's only just going to be more good news later, or are we just trying to read into it too much?
It's really hard to say at this junction, because those first few days of hearing this news is just such a shitstorm of people saying Nintendo are doomed, and all these people writing articles and shit, and people just being angry and annoyed and frustrated that they're just not going toe to toe at E3, and they're not pulling out their guns. But really, when you take a step back and think about it, Nintendo don't want to rush NX. You look at Wii U, and that definitely feels like a system that was rushed to market, that it wasn't prepared out of the gate. They didn't have the good software to back it up. It was not correctly marketed. Like, so many missteps along that road. And I think Nintendo knows that they're in the shit at the moment. Like, does it really matter if they take an extra few months away? Like, does that impact them in the long term? Because number one, they're able to probably court third parties more and hopefully get stuff ready in time for launch. I think there was so Tom Happ, the developer of Axiom Verge, posted a comment on a US Gamer Story about how he had heard from people that potentially he'd be able to get a game ready for NX launch. Like, it's stuff like that where they're able to get indie devs on board, something that results in, you know, a better launch. Secondly, by launching in the spring period, they can get some good games and then over the course of the next 9 months build up a catalogue to the point where when you hit the next holiday season, the proposal is way stronger. Like, what happens when you get to that holiday season, and not only do you have Zelda and, you know, a Smash Brothers port from Wii U and everything, but you also maybe have the next 3D Mario ready. You also have a Metroid game. You have, like, a bunch of indies to support your system. Like, going into 2017 holiday would be a much stronger prospect than them just saying, oh, it's out 2016 holiday, we're going up against PS 4.5 and Xbox 1.5 or whatever the hell, if those even happen, and potentially lose sales to them. So, yeah, there's a lot at stake here. It's really hard to step back and think about it, because in the moment right now, it fucking sucks. We know nothing, we will continue to know nothing, and I think, yeah, the most crushing news is the E3, because this only allows more time for leaks to happen. That's all this does, is like, it makes it so that it's more likely that things about NX are going to be spoken about by people who aren't Nintendo before they get a chance to message it and talk about it. And yes, they will have their own limelight with their own show, but they could just get things out there and get people jazzed and excited. So it's such a hard thing. It's such a hard, you know, line to toe.
I think, yes, it irks me that the E3 is going to feel quite different, let's just say, and quite empty, perhaps. But I'm still a little confused by the news that Zelda Wii U has to be on NX as well. I'm a little surprised that there wasn't... why Zelda can't come out the end of this year and then potentially also make an NX version to launch with the NX. This news would have been just that little bit less bad if we knew Zelda Wii U was coming holiday 2016. And like, it's just a bit strange. And it also means that if you look at Zeldas over consoles, the Wii obviously had Twilight Princess, which has just fallen into the same horrendous position. It had Twilight Princess and it had Skyward Sword. The GameCube had Wind Waker and Twilight Princess. The N64 had Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. All of these systems had like at least one Zelda of their own. And we're now in this position where the one Zelda of its own for the Wii U is going into the Twilight Princess mold, where you're going on to the next system. It just feels like, I don't know which one I'm going to buy. I don't know which one I should buy. Like, should I buy both? It's weird, and I don't know why they want to mess around with Zelda like that so much. It just feels really awkward. I don't think it's surprising that they are leaving Zelda out. It's surprising in the fact that, holy shit, the holiday is dead. There is no big game for the holiday. What the fuck are they going to do about that? And the answer is, well, they're just going to take their lumps and take their hits because NX is around the corner, and, you know, they're just going to have a bad time at the holiday. It wouldn't make sense to put Zelda out on Wii U on its own at Christmas, because the hardcore Nintendo fan is going to buy that, and then they're going to get to NX next year and they're like, oh, but here's the better version that I probably wanted to play anyway, and now I have to buy it again. Like, I understand where you're coming from, is like, in the short term you would rather have it sooner, but a delay also means they can polish it more. It means that they can maybe make it a better product in the end, and it means that by the time you get to NX,
if you really are someone who's just a Wii U owner and that's all you want to do and that's all you want to buy, it's there. But the NX version is the version that most Nintendo fans will play. It's the version that I'm going to play. It's the version that I want to play because it will probably look better. It will probably have a better frame rate. Like, all this stuff which comes with more power, it allows me to just go into that ecosystem stronger. Like, it has the NX as a much more compelling launch because the game that is launching on it is not been in existence before, right? Like, it hasn't been on another system, and it pushes people towards that new console. So I 100% understand why they're doing it. It fucking sucks, but it makes sense, you know?
Yeah. How about a couple of questions from a couple of
before
emails?
we do that, so there was this point that Brian Altano brought out during Nintendo Voice Chat, where he talked about, like, last year's Sony E3 press conference was wild and crazy, but when you step back and think about it, it was also, hey, here's a logo, hey, here's a name of a thing. Like, the Final Fantasy VII Remake, here's a CG trailer we farmed out. Shenmue 3, here's a Kickstarter. Last Guardian, here's a demo that looks like the demo, like, 6 years ago. Like, there was nothing groundbreaking about those reveals that the company necessarily had to do to show them on stage, and yet they blew E3 off the doors. And what I'm saying is, like, Nintendo may not have their software ready to show, but at least, like, with NX, what they could have done at E3 is say, here's a logo for this new thing that is coming, that is guaranteed to be on NX, and here's a CG trailer, maybe. Like, there are ways to build hype and build excitement without necessarily being 100% ready, and that's the sort of thing that ticks the boxes and wins E3 in the minds of gamers, in the minds of critics, in just generally, you know, when it comes to buzz and positive PR. So
yeah,
that's my only caveat there, is, like, had they done E3, they could have really stolen the show. And as a result, like, the big thing that worries me when it comes to Nintendo's NX reveal event is, will people pay attention if they're not Nintendo fans? Because when you have E3, you have mainstream outlets coming there, and they are all focusing on the big news and the big stories. And NX would have been the biggest story at E3. It would have been what all these, like, New York Times, Wall Street Journal would have been writing about, is that. And now that's not happening. Now they become a footnote. And the question is, like, do people pay attention when it comes for their time in the spotlight?
Yeah, I agree. But at the same time, I think Nintendo could definitely be at E3 this year and give us a series of logos of games that would come out on NX that, without even showing the NX if they really wanted to. And yeah, maybe it could win E3 with all these amazing game announcements, but it's almost like they have only so many credits they can spend, and they've decided that, you know, I mean, say they did the logo for some 3D Metroid game that's going to be a launch title for NX, just hypothetically. Like, I feel it doesn't, I don't think the hype is necessarily that healthy in that sense, where it just gets the internet spiraling about that Metroid game, and it would be a bigger surprise if that just came later and then the NX was launched with it and it all came at once, if you know what I mean. Like, that creates a bigger wave rather than a few ripples.
Sure. I mean, yeah, but I think, like, the one thing that this would benefit them is then they get to announce it on their own terms and it doesn't leak. Because, I don't know, I feel like, yeah, it's hard. It's so difficult to talk about this because it's so frustrating and yet also logical. Like, that's the weird thing, is, like, as a fan, it fucking blows. But also, you step back and you think from a business perspective, is it the smart move? Like, it's very difficult to pass, quite honestly.
And, like, we know that Nintendo do know how to hit it out of the park at E3, even in their own way, because I think we thought, and I think many other games journalists thought, that they did hit it out of the park in 2014 with that Direct, which we've been over it many times, but that Direct had a bit of everything, and it was very much Nintendo doing what Sony did last year. It was lots of hype, lots of great stuff, lots of announcements.
But with much more substance, to be honest.
Much more substance.
Like, they actually show gameplay and things.
So, like, we know Nintendo know how to do an E3, even in their new digital mode, but this time they've chosen not to, and we just have to have faith in them that they know how to do something exciting come September, October.
Yeah. But also, sorry, before we move on to the questions, I just want to talk about the idea of Zelda being the only playable thing at E3. They stated that it was because they want some bollocks about, oh yeah, we want people to be fully immersed. It's like, fuck off. Like, that doesn't, obviously that's a bunch of dog shit. But how do you feel about this idea that, like, their entire booth space is just this one game? There's literally, like, we know they have Federation Force and Robobot and, like, all these other 3DS things, and yet the only thing they're taking to E3 is Zelda? That, it's so weird, isn't it? Like, it's just so unprecedented and strange, and I just don't understand it. Like, it feels as though they're saying you might as well not even come if you're, like, Nintendo World Report people have been like, well, fuck, we're not really going to go to E3 this year because why would we when it's one game to cover, and then what do we do? You know, like, there's nothing else. And understandably, they're probably going to talk about more than just Zelda in their digital whatever, but, you know, this doesn't matter to us, right? But this is on the press side. Zelda being the only thing, how do you feel about that?
I think there is something up their sleeve about this. Like, everyone's visualizing the massive Nintendo space with a few kiosks of Zelda, Wii U, and nothing else. I think there has to be a surprise, whether that's lots of different types of kiosks with Zelda that have much longer in-depth demos, whether there's something about Zelda Wii U we don't know about that they want to demo in their own way, whether there are potentially smaller games that are, you know, third-party eShop stuff that does become playable. I think there is something that's going to happen to prevent everyone's visual image of, you know, a couple of kiosks in this big space with just Zelda. I think there has to be something. I know Nintendo do their crazy stuff, but I don't believe that they will do that. There has to be something. I have no suggestions as to what that might be, to be honest, but it can't be that terrible visualization. It just can't. On paper, at the moment, it is. I agree, but yeah. I think.
Well, I mean, like, Bally, you and I, we're going to Gamescom in August, and this no NX news is kind of a bit of
that's true, yeah.
You know, a bullet in us there, but, like, at least we're going to be able to play Zelda. Like, they're going to have Zelda at Gamescom. That's pretty fucking cool. Like, we'll play the game. But then you step back and it's like, oh, but this is the shit version of Zelda. This is the Wii U version.
Exactly. That's a whole other level.
They're showing the inferior version of the game. Like, it's so, like, on every level, this is just fucking weird. The analogy is if Nintendo rocked up to E3 2006 and were like, oh yeah, the only version of Twilight Princess you can play is the GameCube one. People would have been like, what the fuck? You have this new console coming out. Why are we playing the old version? Like, it's so illogical, isn't it? And yet,
you say old version, you say inferior version. Even with Twilight Princess, there were plenty of people who did feel that the GameCube version was actually the better version.
Right, but that was to do with control. That wasn't necessarily to do with visuals, because you have the widescreen mode in the Wii version, and it looks slightly better. Not greatly, because of course the Wii wasn't that much more powerful. But
definitely, but we can't. I think it's harsh to claim that the Wii U version will be inferior before we even know anything.
I mean, it will be inferior. I can just,
who knows?
Yeah, of course it will. It'll be visually inferior. Of course it will. Like, the frame rate is definitely going to be 30 on Wii U. Like, judging from Xenoblade, the fact that they're using what looks like the same engine, it's a huge open world game. They're going to be running that game at 30 FPS. I would put money that the NX version of Zelda runs at 60, and I would say that is enough for me to be like, fuck this Wii U version, you know? Like, that's a significant, for me personally, that's significant.
Yeah, definitely, but I mean, we don't know controls, and there's so much murkiness around this news that it's just horrendous. It's just horrendous to talk about, like, even trying to contemplate, oh, will I get the NX version or the Wii U version of this game, and why? But you're right, it is completely mental that they are going to do E3 with one version of the game, bearing in mind that this same game is coming out on the NX.
This is a blowout for the flagship launch title of their next system, and they're showing it on their old system. It's just... it boggles the fucking mind, you know? Oh, God. What a clusterfuck of everything this has been, Bally.
How about some questions?
Sure. Throw some questions into the mix.
We have Terence from North Carolina. Hi, MBZ and Bally. It's Terence again with another question or two relating to what's happening with Nintendo in 2016 and 2017. With the news that the NX and Zelda won't be released until 2017 and the fact that E3 will have a minimal Nintendo presence, my questions are as follows. Number 1. Without any marquee releases for 2016 on the current console, the Wii U, will Nintendo lose potential new buyers, especially with big releases by Sony and Microsoft and even VR going all out this year?
Okay. Was it another question, or are we just...
Shall we do one at a time? Shall we just...
Sure. Yeah, so this is something I think a lot of people have been questioning, is like, with the potential PlayStation Neo and Xbox 1.5, was that a consideration here by Nintendo? And I don't think it is. I think this decision was made long before anyone knew about those systems. VR, maybe, but like, I think this is definitely much more to do with Nintendo's internal delays than anything influenced by Sony or Microsoft. Like, we know, and we have known for a long time, Nintendo march to the beat of their own drum. They do not consider themselves to be competing with Sony or Microsoft, which, as smart or stupid as that may be, that's what they say. I definitely think that they could benefit from moving out of that clusterfuck of a window, because a holiday which supposedly was going to have like little to no hardware launches suddenly has a whole new virtual reality headset plus potentially 2 new versions of hardware from Microsoft and Sony. So maybe it is good that they're out of the way, because then people have like less choice at that time of year. On the other hand, if people spend the money then do they have enough left over for spring when the new Nintendo system comes out? Like, it's the way that balance is, which is the problem to overcome here.
I mean, the question, will Nintendo lose Wii U buyers going into this holiday season? Definitely, but I mean,
100%.
We're talking like opportunity costs between a few hundred Wii U's, maybe more than that. Some Wii U's being sold end of this year, or shall we get everyone focused on NX for 2017? And they've obviously just stuck all their eggs on 2017 NX launch, and you just have to accept that decision, respect it, because it's probably the right one out of those two options, and just go along with it. I mean, we've talked about this on the show as well before, MBZ, is that like how much of Nintendo's market is eaten up by Sony and Microsoft. And I think the answer that we came to before is like only part of it. Like, I think gamers who want Nintendo systems as well as other systems only make up part of Nintendo fans. I think there, at the same time, there are a lot of much younger Nintendo fans who would only ever buy a Nintendo console, and then on top of that, I think there's very, very casual gamers who, you know, maybe it might have come in from Wii, who just want a very casual, simple experience. I don't think that Microsoft and Sony directly impact Nintendo all the time. Definitely a lot of the time, but not all the time. So I think that maybe comparing the buyers versus whatever they're doing with VR and, you know, the Sony and the Xbox 1.5 and shit and all that, it's not necessarily overlapping entirely. So I think Nintendo just like to operate in their own little bubble almost.
Yeah, I just wonder, like, I think a lot of people are going to end up putting money that they would have put towards NX towards, like, PSVR, potentially. And does that mean that by the time NX rolls around that, hey, I already spent that cash on the thing for this year?
What if Nintendo were cheeky and they stuck out a price point in time for the holiday season, so they could say, hey, NX is going to be this much, say, I don't know, $200, $300, and then that comes in, undercuts, the new Sony Microsoft platforms or VR, and then parents can be like, oh well, actually the NX is coming out at that time. I'm not going to waste my money on my kids for this holiday. They're going to want that. It's cheaper. Let's go for that.
What you mean, like if they announce what the price is prior to the holiday season at like the NX reveal event?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so they have like at least a card in the mix, even if they don't have their system to sell.
Okay. Yeah, that potentially. I mean, I don't know how many people actually will know that information, or if it'll be.
I mean, you like to have faith that when parents are spending that much money, that they do some research. Surely, you hope. Definitely,
and
not
you
all
also
will.
maybe kind of crutch on the idea that parents are like, you already own a PS4. Why would I buy this other PS4? You know,
yeah,
like, this could kick Sony in the arse in the same way that Nintendo get kicked in the arse. Like, hey, son, you already own a PS4. This is a PS4. Why do you want this? You know, like, hey, they got to be careful about how they message that shit. So I don't know. Well, it'll be really interesting because I want to know when that happens how well Sony do, and like if it's bad, Nintendo have a chance to swoop in and steal a lot of mind share.
Definitely.
What was the other question?
Yes, so Terrence's second question is that March 2017 seems an odd release date for a major console, especially here in America. Of course, hardcore fans will buy whenever, but does this date help or hurt the NX when most people, especially parents, have spent all their new device money in the fall?
Yeah, well, I think we've covered some of this, but yeah, I think it's different for North America than it is for Europe because everything is so Black Friday centralized, like that is the crux, that is the point at which all the holiday shopping gets done. And after that, like the question is how much of a buffer is there after Christmas before people start spending money again? That's the real question. It's like January, February, obviously quite dead. By the time March, April rolls around, is that reasonable to think that people are starting to consider spending stuff again? Like that's where it comes into it, because I do think like a lot of the budget goes and splooges on Christmas, and then they're just like, okay, now we just need to calm down for a second.
I strongly think, and I've actually I probably think this more from now living in Brussels, that sort of mainland Europe and Europeans, they just tend to spend far more evenly throughout the year. Like the whole sort of process of capitalism isn't driven as hard as it is in America to these sort of pressure points during the year where you have your holiday season, got to spend it all then. I'm not working off data here. I'm working off gut instinct, that I do genuinely think that Europeans just tend to spend more evenly throughout the year.
Interesting. So potentially like that could affect the North American sales as opposed to the European.
Yeah, potentially.
Japanese.
But I mean, like I was saying with Alex Navarro's point from earlier, that it's very sort of territory that's never been sort of delved into before. So it'll be interesting, and it's definitely a risk.
Yeah. Before we move on to like more emails, I want to pose the question of NX as a handheld and console again to you, because I feel like everything we've been hearing has centered around the idea that NX is a home console. The fact that we're talking about Zelda on NX. The fact that Kimishima has said 3DS has a bunch of software in 2016. Also, there's a bunch of unannounced 3DS software that we're still pushing. The fact that Pokemon Sun and Moon is a key cornerstone of their holiday lineup and is a 3DS game. Do you think that Nintendo are gonna try and move Wii U out the way for this NX console version and still crutch on 3DS as their main handheld platform until a further point in the future? Do you think that's a reasonable expectation? And also, if that's the case, do you think that NX doesn't launch in Japan until a handheld version of it becomes available?
To your first point, I definitely think the 3DS will fade away. As much as, yes, Pokemon is coming out, I think that you would have seen far more emphasis on perhaps the new 3DS or things like that. Like they really aren't.
Well, maybe that'll happen at E3. We don't know what E3 is going to hold in terms of the stuff they actually announce, because they're going to announce something. It's not just going to be Zelda. Like, there are going to be 3DS games that get talked about.
Perhaps.
So.
But I mean, I'm still of the view that the NX is going to have a strong handheld component that, you know, will launch the same time. Or well, we sort of decided that the handheld element might be this year, and the home console element would be next year. I think it's maybe starting with this news. It's perhaps looking more likely for them to come out at the same time. But that's just me guessing. I really think that there isn't that much life left in the 3DS, personally. I think they if you can get experiences like the new Zelda onto the handheld, like, that is really an area where Nintendo haven't gone before, where you're having these, obviously they have had full 3D experiences on the 3DS, but nothing to the degree of, you know, we know what this new Zelda is going to look like. It looks incredible, and like something like that on handheld is just a new stepping stone for Nintendo, and I think it would be mad if the NX doesn't do that.
See, I'm much less convinced now about the handheld portion. I mean, I think it's going to happen. I just don't think it's going to happen at the same time. And it seems like they definitely are looking to push this as the home console, and that means that the 3DS gets more focus as a strong platform that they have an install base on. Maybe it becomes a third pillar idea where they keep the 3DS around for as long as they can because they have 50-60 million install base. But yeah, for me, it definitely, just the way they've been saying stuff makes me wonder, and it makes me second guess that concept.
You're having a hard time visualizing, you know, this new Zelda on the home console and on the handheld element.
Right. I mean, like, it's possible, but God, I don't know. It's just becoming weird in my head.
There's so much mystery. It's just crazy. But yeah.
Oh, so much.
All
right. Well, what's the next email?
Another email is from James. Is from the internet. I'm still very much in the camp that the NX is going to be radically new, with my money on the console being cartridge-based and the controller being haptic, all of which will take explanation in and of themselves. As a result, I think they've made the right decision to skip E3 for the NX reveal. E3 is a leaky place as it is, and stuff will be leaked before Nintendo would be able to explain. But it's also a very bad place for complex details. Things get lost in the shuffle, especially when the press have to report on the new PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One DD. Moreover, I think the big advantage to be had from shrinking E3 is accessibility. If the controller is buttonless when turned off, that's going to be scary to a lot of people, and they're going to want to alleviate that fear as soon as possible. I could see Nintendo doing hands-on events in multiple cities the day of the reveal, where people can go and feel the games, like physically feel them. Not only does this alleviate fears of the most hardcore, but it distributes the information of how the haptic physically feels, which is something no amount of audio or visual marketing can do. Is it disappointing that E3 is going to be quiet on the news front? Of course, but for a successful launch of a console, I can deal with a dull E3. Moreover, I can see Nintendo going the Bethesda route with its focus on one game for the conference, showing a lot of it and having an hour or more of demo for people to get their teeth into on the show floor. This Zelda is the known system seller for NX, though there will obviously be more, and I think it'll need a good amount of time to go all in. It's also worth looking at their wording, as Nintendo have a habit of going to the letter. Zelda will be the only game on the floor at E3 doesn't preclude eShop demos, especially for any big 3DS games, as most games journalists will have those with them anyway. I think Nintendo still has room for a surprise or two.
So I think he's referring to a couple of patents that maybe lean the idea that Nintendo are not using discs for their new console, and there would be cartridge, which would allow them to have a kind of way to bridge the handheld and console versions, and also the idea that they are potentially still using a touchscreen controller which doesn't have physical buttons but has haptic buttons. People don't know what haptic stuff is. Haptic buttons are basically a way to make a touchscreen morph its form and change on the fly so that it can basically rearrange itself and have physical like buttons pop up in the middle of it, and then when you're done with them, like phase back in to create a flat touchscreen again. I think maybe the first question is, Bally, do you think that that's a thing that Nintendo would do? Do you think that like their great new concept is that they have this controller that is a whole touchscreen that has like buttons embedded within it, like the Leak potentially?
I personally can't see Nintendo going that route. It sounds incredibly expensive. It seems like
like high-end technology.
Exactly. It's more effort than it's worth. I think it's definitely the sort of thing that's in the realm. It's something like VR. You know, it's very futuristic, very technical, very, very, very expensive, and ultimately might not have as big of an impact on gameplay as Nintendo might want. And I think with stuff like the Wii and the Wii U, Nintendo were using existing technology in their own Nintendo way, and haptic buttons is not existing technology. It's the future. Like, Nintendo don't want to.
Well, I mean, the technology exists, but like it's not really being used by anyone that frequently.
Yeah, I'm not convinced that it's the road Nintendo would choose.
Yeah, like you look at even the touchscreen on Wii U is a resistive touchscreen. It's not like an iPhone where it's capacitive, where it's multi-touch, all that stuff. Like, it's the bare bones basic technology. And anyone thinking that Nintendo are going to go all out this time and are going to be like super powerful, more than the PS4, and like, I think you're going to be sorely disappointed. Like, I just don't see them changing their skin when it comes to that stuff, because it doesn't make sense for them logically. Like, they need to be a baseline equal with the other competitors to have third-party support, but I don't think they go above and beyond that, to be perfectly honest. Like, it doesn't sound like Nintendo to me to go that route. And I don't know, like, it seems like more trouble than it's worth. You think about the idea of, they had a hard enough fucking time explaining the Wii U gamepad to people without having them getting a tizwaz about it. Imagine, like, the fervor when they're like, oh yeah, and the buttons come up and people are like, oh, that's not real buttons, oh, I don't want to do that. And I get James's idea of having stations for people to go to, but not fucking everyone can go to those. Like, that's going to be a very limited select group of people, and maybe there's some good word of mouth that comes out of it, but there's still going to be skepticism. Like, there's amazing word of mouth about VR. I don't have any, experience with it. I'm still skeptical because I get motion sick. So as good as word of mouth can be, it's not going to convince everyone, and it's going to be a hard thing to contend with. I think Nintendo want as few road barriers as possible when it comes to that stuff. So I don't see it being a thing. When he talks about E3 being a leaky place, I could say the same of their own event, or of like when they start giving stuff to third parties. Like, sure, stuff leaks out before E3, but stuff's probably going to leak out before their own event anyway. So, like, regardless of whether they did it then or later, it's still probably going to happen.
When do we think, talking of sort of leaks and time windows, so we now know it's coming March 2017, supposedly.
Yes.
When do you think we will know what NX is, and how long does that therefore mean they have to keep everything under wraps? Like, how long before leaks start coming out?
Man, I definitely think that the earliest is September. The start of September is probably the earliest. I think latest is end of October. I think they have that 2-month window where it's before the holidays begin. It's a time where they are around 6 months, 5 months out from launch of the system. It's when they need to tell people whatever they're going to be getting themselves into. That is when I think that they will have their own event, is around that time period.
We've already called this the apocalypse, but
yes,
is there any chance that Nintendo turn this into holiday 2017?
Oh boy. Yes, of course there is. There's
Yes.
always a chance. There's always a chance. But then that also means Zelda turns into holiday 2017. Because I can't see them delaying NX and then saying, oh, the Wii U Zelda's coming out in March anyway. I still think they want to keep that stuff in tandem. And I can see why people are scared, because saying March 2017 is kind of just a default answer, because that's when the fiscal year ends. And they want to say to their investors, it will be this fiscal year. So they could get to the end of their fiscal year and be like, no, we were wrong. It's going to be a holiday, and then fucking move it. So that is a well-founded fear. I think you're right to be scared of that. But I think that Nintendo have fucking nothing for 2016. Can you imagine how bad 2017 will be? Like, just imagine the dearth of software that 2017
Adding to
will
that,
have.
to that fear, I've not seen this video. It's just a short sort of news clip video, a hype video that Game Explain love to do. I've not actually watched this video, but the title of the video basically just said that apparently Nintendo have removed March 2017 from their website or something, and now it just says 2017. Like, apparently that changed.
Yeah, I've heard that stuff. That seems like a clerical error to me.
You think that's a
it
clerical
seems like
error?
Yeah, it seems like something that they haven't communicated properly to the people who are dealing with the back end.
We hope.
So,
yeah,
we hope.
Yeah, cool.
So, fuck, man, what a whirlwind it's been. I think let's also discuss quickly. I don't want to spend a huge amount of time on it, but there was also some other news that came out. Nintendo's next 2 mobile games got announced. They are going to be based on the Fire Emblem and Animal Crossing franchises. To me, this sounds pretty great. Like, I think that they have been smart in terms of picking 2 franchises that seem very well suited from a gameplay perspective to a touchscreen and to mobile devices.
Yeah, I think these 2 choices are almost perfect. And what I mean by that is that, yes, they both suit touchscreens, but they also... Fire Emblem is generally a hardcore game, and Animal Crossing is an incredibly casual game. Like, it's a nice combination that can appeal to their different groups of fans. And someone like us, we might try to pick up both of them, and I just think it's a really good idea to not just do a hardcore or game or do something casual, to actually mix it up and try both. I think that's a really great experiment.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that pitching these 2 different games, which are so completely far away from one another in terms of genre, in terms of audience, certainly helps them capture as wide a net as possible. And I also think that both these franchises are really ripe for mobile monetize. Oh my fucking god! I can't say the word. Bally, save me! Save me!
Monetization.
I'm trying to add an extra "is" in the monetization. That's so fucking stupid. Anyway, yes, you know what I'm saying. I think that, like, they have the perfect strategy here to extort people, which personally I don't like. But when we're talking about the mobile market, that's where the big players are making their money, is the free-to-play space and having packs and having add-ons. Fire Emblem is, like, built for this. You even take a look at Awakening right now. Go into the shop in that game, and there are DLC packs on DLC packs on DLC packs. Like, so much content added on you can buy for that series. And you just imagine what they do with Animal Crossing with, like, oh, get this piece of furniture, which is a Nintendo branded sofa or whatever. Like, they can be real dicks about it. And I wonder how much of an asshole they're going to be when it comes to that real, like, digging into people and being like, hey, do you want Mario's hat? You better fucking pay for Mario's hat,
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. And when I said, like, how yes, Sony and Microsoft are competition, but they're not always direct competition. This sort of mobile experience that Nintendo are going for is just an example of that. This is like completely different market that they're aiming at, and it's pretty exciting. And obviously, we've expressed our views on Miitomo. I think it's pretty much what we thought it was going to be to some extent.
Miitomo is really a user acquisitions
exactly,
experiment.
but you're a very big Fire Emblem fan. I'm a big Fire Emblem fan. I think that's going to be quite cool. And, I'm personally chomping at the bit for a bit more Animal Crossing because I obviously missed out on New Leaf. So I'm intrigued to see what they can do with this.
If they get the friend stuff right with Animal Crossing, like, it could be the least friction we've ever had in terms of trying to visit towns and doing all that kind of stuff.
It could be the most potty-mouthed situation ever.
Oh, God, yeah. But they've also said that this Animal Crossing will connect to console version. So I think maybe tacitly admitting that there's actually an NX Animal Crossing in the works, which wouldn't be surprising at all.
That would be nice.
And you take a look at, like, how many franchises skipped Wii U and how many things that have... Like, the big takeaway, I think, from all of this is that Nintendo want to have a strong launch. This could be the greatest launch of any let alone Nintendo, of any games platform in history. If they have strong Wii U ports like Splatoon, Mario Maker, and Smash, if they have Zelda there, if they have a brand new 3D Mario, like, if their software development has been going well and they have focused in on NX, holy shit, could it be a launch?
I mean, we've said it before, but, Nintendo, with their backs up against the wall, is the best Nintendo. And that's the position they're in now, so we have very high expectations.
Extremely, yeah. They've earned them, but,
One final announcement.
Go, Bally.
They've given up their share in the Seattle Mariners.
Gutted, what a shame.
Devastated. So apparently
they
bought the majority share in the 90s, and the aim was to win the World Series like in the next 10 or 15 years, I believe, which they basically didn't do. But it was an interesting thing they did, and they did some cool stuff with the 3DS a few years ago, and I don't know. It was just interesting that this Japanese video game company owned the majority stake in an American baseball team. I thought that was quite cool, but it's a shame that.
And you're kind of interested in baseball as well, and you've been to baseball games.
Come on, the Blue Jays. Come on, the Blue Jays. So Nintendo, why didn't you invest in the Blue Jays? But just something I throw in that.
I mean, it's an easy way to get a bunch of cash real quick, and I think they need it right now. They need to shore up and get ready for a big launch, and they don't need to have a baseball team. So it makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. It's just making the company a little more linear, sleeker. They don't need extra guys advising them on how the Mariners are doing and how that investment is going. Let's just focus on this NX, goddammit, because that's what matters right now. So it's good. It's good news in that sense, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I'm still excited for Zelda at E3. Bally, our prediction segment might be the worst, most boring thing we've ever done. I think the great thing about this is, I have no expectations now. My hype is at a fucking zero. So anything they say is kind of icing on the cake, it's kind of good because we go in there and we're don't expect anything whatsoever.
I mean, I'm going to go, I don't think my expectations are at zero. I am damn excited about this Zelda game, and there is so much we don't know about it that I hope they will reveal at E3. And
I think the fact that Zelda is here alone makes this a better E3 than last year. I know that's cutting, but fucking hell, last year was bleak.
When the sort of cross-console coverage starts coming, and then everyone goes to the Nintendo section, it's only going to be talk about Zelda, and that might be quite refreshing in its own bizarre way.
Yeah, definitely.
Or maybe we're just trying to polish this way too much. But
polishing a turd is hard work, Bally.
Polishing a turd is very hard work.
Oh boy. So is that? Do we have anything else regarding this? I think there's some rumors and stuff that have been popping up. Emily Rogers has been talking about Retro Studios working on something that isn't Donkey Kong or Metroid, potentially a new IP. I don't know. Lots of stuff to still go on with. I'm sure we'll talk about it in the coming shows, episodes, all that stuff. But I feel like we're going to wrap it up here, Bally. It's be the end of the show. Yeah, thanks for listening. And thanks for sending in some thoughts about NX. We'll get back to some regular listener mail next show. So, Bally, tell people where they can send all those in.
Please send all your emails to thisnintendolife@gmail.com. That is thisnintendolife@gmail.com.
We need some more. Please send it.
Always
give us
more.
Your ideas about what Nintendo can do.
What are your
to make this less
reactions
of a
to our
catastrophe.
reactions?
Oh, God. It's an endless chain, isn't it?
We need your
Just
reactions
never.
to our reactions on this
Right.
news.
So then we can react to the reaction.
Exactly.
Oh, God. Bally, where can people find us on the internet? Where are you placed in the World Wide Web?
You can find me on the internet, on Twitter. I'm at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN91. Please follow me. I'm almost at 300 followers.
Yeah, let's get Bally to 300 followers.
Yeah, let's do it. It's a nice big round number. That would be cool. I'd love that.
Yes.
Also follow the show's Twitter account. The show's Twitter account is at TNL Podcast. That's at TNL Podcast. It's the best feed to follow if you want to see all the stuff we're doing in between the podcast episodes. When we fancy making a video or fancy doing a poll question or doing something a bit off the rails, we like to tweet it on there.
Exactly. You should go there for all the hot takes. A lot of hot takes happening.
Takes.
You can find me. I'm at Lordnbz. It's also my Miiverse. I guess. Let's talk about quickly the Nintendo Humble Bundle happened.
Oh yeah, of
which
course.
was an awesome fucking thing. This is the biggest twist around. Was the evening before all the NX news came out was Nintendo Humble Bundle. I was like, oh my god, Bally, this is so fucking cool. All these games, it's really good. And then they obviously had to twist the knife, so that was kind of dark. But it's really good. If you didn't know, if you don't know what a Humble Bundle is because you're a Nintendo person, you've never used a PC before, it's basically a place, it's a website. You go to humblebundle.com, the Nintendo one should be there, and you pay a minimum of $1 and you'll get a bunch of games. You pay a bit more over the average and you get more, and they're all a great price for 7, 8, 9 games for Wii U and 3DS. And you get the codes. You can directly download them by just clicking a button or just put the code into your system. We're not sponsored by Humble Bundle. I just think they did this for North America, I think, last year, and I was really fucking annoyed because they didn't have European versions. They fixed that this time, so even if you're in Europe, you can actually get access to it, which is great.
And it goes to charity, right?
Yes, you can actually decide how you want to split the money. So part of it goes to the developers, part of it goes to charity, part of it goes to Humble themselves. So you can just kind of do the split however you want it to go, and it'll all work out in that way. So yeah, I recommend you do that. I was saying that because I was like, I'm not really playing a Nintendo console game at the moment, but I probably will be soon because we've got Shantae on there, which I'll probably start on 3DS. Rhythm Thief, which I've been wanting to play for a while. So a lot of good stuff in that bundle. You should definitely check that out. And yeah, you can find the show, the regular places, regular times. We're on iTunes. Just had a recent review from one Kevin Sharma, which was an excellent review. We really enjoyed that, so thank you to him. And we hope more people go and review us on iTunes. It's a wonderful thing to spread news about the podcast, and that's the thing that helps us grow the most is reviews. So
Absolutely.
do go and do that. We love reading and hearing from you. And yeah, we're on Stitcher, YouTube. I think Google Play are starting.
iTunes on Mondays, YouTube on Wednesdays.
Yes, I think Google Play are starting up their own podcast thing, so I might look into getting that on Android stuff for people. I'll figure that out, hopefully. I'll let you know in the future.
Let us know if you want that.
Yeah, you should do. I don't know how many people use the Google Play Store for podcasts, but it's an initiative that they're going through. So, and I think that's probably it, Bally. There's not much software coming out, but we got a hot backlog to get on with, so let's go do that.
I've got to pick up Star Fox, and then there's Fire Emblem around the corner. There's
It
so
is.
much to play.
There is. So worry not. Despite Nintendo having a dead 2016, it will not be a dead This Nintendo Life. We'll be trucking along as per usual. So thank you all for listening. And I guess we'll see you in a couple of weeks' time. Goodbye, everyone. The musical interlude used on today's show was More London Streets from Professor Layton and the Unwound Future. Copyright Level 5, 2008.
Definitely, because it's been pretty low-key, actually.
Yeah.
Compared to... it got overshadowed by some other news, basically.
Yes. Uh-huh. No shit, it got overshadowed. Yeah, that's the biggest heel turn, is like, that evening, the Humble Bundle, I was like, oh my god, it's so cool, I love Nintendo! I wake up the next day, fuck everything.
Yeah.
Oh, what a heel turn.